Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kay Gilbert, and I run the Tennis Parents Community, which is an award-winning support network of over 2,700 parents whose children are training within the GB tennis system. We're a group of parents who've come together to share knowledge, experiences, and practical advice on how best to support children in the sport. Every family's situation is different, no matter what age or level their child is playing, and juggling finances and time are really quite challenging. So we understand also that navigating the complexities of the sport are also quite challenging, and the community is here to help you to figure out what works best for you. If you're a tennis player based in the UK and not yet a member, come and join us on Facebook. Just search for the Tennis Parents Community. You'll also find us on Instagram, and our YouTube channel is full of recordings of helpful sessions just like this one. These are available not just to parents, but also to coaches, volunteers, officials, and anyone internationally who wants to better understand the world of junior tennis. Now, this week is National School Sports Week, and today I'm joined by Michelle, who is the Schools and Further Education Manager for the LTA. And she's been in this position for the last 6.5 years, out of her 10 years that she's now worked for the LTA. After graduating from the University of Exeter with a master's degree in education, Michelle initially worked as a PE teacher and I'm going to start that one again, and a school sports coordinator. Gosh, I'm going to have to practice that one. A school sports coordinator before joining the LTA, where she has held various posts connected with helping more children to experience tennis via schools and then sustain that involvement with tennis within the local community. Michelle's going to help us to understand more about the LTA Youth Schools programme and what you can do to make sure that your school is not missing out on all the resources and opportunities open to them for tennis. Welcome to the Tennis Parents Community, Michelle Gray.
Thanks, Kay. And what an introduction.
Yeah, a bit of a mouthful, your titles there in the past. Sorry about that one. I'm sure you knew what I was talking about.
I did, yeah.
So perhaps we could just start by asking you what's the best thing about your job at the LTA, Michelle?
Uh, the best thing, and I do get asked this, is that no day is the same. So when you come from a teaching background, as you just explained, where, you know, lessons, breaks, start of the day, end of the day are military precision. And you know where you're going to be exactly when, at what point every day. The difference to having this job is just the no moment is the same, let alone any day being the same.
That's interesting. It's often true in sport generally, isn't it? My youngest daughter was working in lettings, and she had an office job, and then she decided to rediscover some of her roots and go back into sport, and is now a tennis coach. And she really loves that flexibility. I guess perhaps as she gets a bit older, maybe the flexibility of a tennis coach's life isn't so secure. But no, it is a pleasure, isn't it, to be able to perhaps work from home or do something out and about in schools, but not have that rigid timetable that you're subjected to as a teacher.
Yeah.
So what problem were you trying to fix by bringing tennis into schools? What are the LTA's thoughts in this space? Is it something they've always done? Is it a new thing?
Yeah, we've always had a schools program. It sat with the Tennis Foundation in terms of strategy, but is now, and then it was delivered through the LTA. But since the LTA Tennis Foundation have coming together, then it now sits with the LTA. And in terms of what problem we're trying to solve with it, it's about growing participation for children. And the biggest impact that we see it through schools is on annual participation. Obviously, schools have to deliver a large number of physical activities and sports. And for us, we want to drive participation through schools because this is where children, young people have their first experience of sport. So we want it to be a positive experience, but also a quality experience. So therefore, if we support schools in choosing to deliver tennis and then delivering it well, the theory is that more young people pick up a racket, but then they also continue to play because they enjoyed it at school. And I should say that child participation annually is at an all-time high at the moment. So I like to think that the schools program is having a direct impact on that.
Well, I think it's a good thing for tennis, whoever you are, isn't it? If more people are playing, I guess, we get times when we can't find a coach or we can't manage to book a court because there's so much participation, and those are great problems to have for our sport. And I'm sure the LTA have got plans as to how to address that and so forth. But ultimately, if you're a parent in an area where not many people play tennis and your child is being disadvantaged and you're having to travel further to play tournaments aren't happening in your area, they're not getting filled up, then getting the LTA getting more children involved in tennis is a positive thing for them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that you have to play annually before you start playing monthly. And then you have to play monthly before you start playing weekly. And obviously, in terms of regularly playing and competing juniors, they're the ones who are playing weekly or monthly, but you have to start with the annual participation. So the pyramid has to then filter down to that higher level.
And actually, the children whose parents are perhaps listening tonight are great role models, aren't they, for those within those schools? And I know tennis isn't a sport that you can necessarily show off your talent in within school classically, not like the fastest runner in the playground. But it's nice to think that your children's talent can be celebrated within a school, perhaps as well, and that you can get extra resources coming to the school during school time to augment what your child's getting, perhaps in a paid program in a venue, a park, or a club.
Yeah, absolutely. And from LTA Youth more broadly, we want to have a consistent approach and principles across all the different venues. So from schools to clubs to coaching to parks. So if you have a good experience in school, you also have a similar and good experience in community, and vice versa. Because what we don't want to do is put off kids who are playing regularly and then they go to school and it's a terrible experience because nobody else can play against them to the same level, but also that the teachers are utilizing their skills and knowledge and, as you said, celebrating what they do.
So you mentioned that term LTA Youth Schools. People might have heard of LTA Youth because they'll have picked that up perhaps at a club level. But can you tell us specifically what LTA Youth Schools is?
Yeah, it kind of says what it is on the tin. It is the strand for schools within LTA Youth. So LTA Youth is the umbrella term for any part, well, any activities for under 18s. And obviously schools is one strand and subsection of that. But in terms of what it actually is, it's a free program for schools, and teachers, anyone from school staff, anyone involved in school delivery can access a wealth of resources. There's a lot there, but it's all been written by teachers for teachers. It's mapped against the English, Scottish, and Welsh curriculums. It's cross-curricular, and it's completely flexible. So sometimes we say the word program and we think it has to be delivered. This is what happens on week 1. This is what happens on week 2, etc. But it's completely flexible, and we provide detailed lesson plans for teachers to say, this is what we anticipate you would want to deliver. However, you've got the autonomy to pick and choose what suits for your students that you're teaching. And supporting each lesson plan is a series of videos of the activity in action, either in a primary school or in a secondary school.
So the skills that the teachers are being asked to help develop in the children, I think if I understood correctly, you said they're very much mapped to what they would have to deliver somehow. And it would be great for tennis if they were doing that through tennis skills, but they're covering skills that are more general to all sports. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the PE curriculum as it is now is quite broad in that they're trying to develop fundamental movement skills in primary school and linking those together, and then applying the skills in secondary school in the most broadest sense of the. So what we want to do is help schools choose to deliver tennis, and it's the vehicle to delivering fundamental movement skills or the application of skills. And as you said, there's lots of transferable skills, and in everything we do for the primary school we ask them to do it on both right and left sides of their body so that they are developing bilateral coordination. It's really developing a 360 athlete rather than a tennis player. So, as you said, they will then naturally transfer those skills to other sports. So we'd rather that they chose to deliver those skills through tennis and develop those skills through tennis than another sport.
So a parent watching might say, oh, well, my child's school don't deliver any tennis at all, but actually the child themselves might not even realize that the content that they're having taught to them in their PE session might actually be tennis developed and related.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you start at primary school compared to where you probably end up at secondary school, there's a lot of scaffolded steps between the two. And the first bit is about sending and receiving, and you can simplify that by just sending a ball and receiving a ball, and then you gradually build in using hitting implements, and then eventually it looks like a forehand and a backhand. So there's lots of steps to get to that.
That's really interesting. And if a parent wanted to sort of find out that sort of content, is there any access to to parents if they're not teachers?
So some of this is available on the Parents at Home page, but also in terms of the LTA Youth more broadly, it's there on the LTA page. But in terms of the actual school's content, because it's written for teachers in that teaching and learning education language, that's on a portal that teachers can access for free via the LTA website.
So how are you doing so far with the program? How far has it reached, and what's your objectives next?
Yeah, so we have over 15,000 schools registered. So that's over half the schools in Great Britain.
Is that secondary and primary, or any other flavour?
Any school, yeah, any school. So we're over 15,000 schools. We work on the principle that there's circa 28,000 schools open at any one time. So we're already over 50% of schools who've registered to take part. We have over 39,500 individuals registered to the programme.
That's teachers.
Yeah, so individuals, so teachers, school-based staff, but we also have individuals who are training to be teachers, so initial teacher training, those people who are at university training to be a teacher. And then our kind of key objective is around teachers trained. And we have over 28,000 teachers who've completed either an online training course or a face-to-face training course.
Big figures. How long have you been going for so far?
Yeah, so LTA Youth Schools launched in February 2020. So it did have a bit of a false start, but we launched again in February 2021. So yeah, just 5 years.
So the first step that just a school or teacher, there's different ways into this, aren't there, by the sound of it? So for parents are listening and thinking, okay, I don't even know whether my school have done this or not. Let's answer that one first. How can they find that out?
Well, the best way is to ask the school, are they registered to LTA Youth Schools? As I said, it's free. It's on the LTA website. And from that, we would, if the answer is no from the school, then please advocate for them to sign up. As I said, it's free and we'd want them to do that.
So that's within the LTA website, not the competition website portal, but the actual main LTA website, and just navigate to the schools section.
Yeah.
And the school just sign up using what their kind of reference number for them as a school.
Yeah, so it's as an individual. So as you would create an Advantage account, they do for schools. The URL or the link is lta.org.uk/schools. So they create that account, and as they go through the process, they link themselves to a school.
So it's the individual teacher that does it, and they link themselves to a school. So
yeah.
So it's possible that your school might have been linked, but no longer a link because the teacher's moved to another school. Is that
Yeah.
So you need to find out the current person within the school who is linked?
Yeah. And there's no limit to the number of individuals who could be or who can have an account and link to a school. So if you've got a PE department at a secondary school of 10 teachers, the hope would be that they all had their own individual account to access the resources directly.
Okay, and once they've set that up, they can then take e-learning. Is that what you said, face-to-face or e-learning?
Yeah, yeah. So there's an online training course which is circa 2 hours. Obviously, depends how quickly they whiz through it. But then also there's a face-to-face course which is we split it by primary and secondary, but the tutor would always tailor it to the audience in front of them. So if they were, you know, a primary school that never delivered any tennis before, would look slightly different to a primary school that was delivering loads of tennis and had slightly higher level students. Or if there was a special school and they were needing to focus more on inclusive and disability tennis. So they can choose and they can do both types of training. And I guess why we put so much emphasis on teacher training is that 99% of people, or 99% of teachers, tell us that their teaching has improved after completing a course. And if I kind of loop back to the beginning, if they've improved their delivery, everyone's going to have a better experience and obviously, hopefully, improve their skills more.
So once the teacher signed up, can they access the lesson plans automatically, or do they have to do the training? The two are separate, are they?
Yeah, it's all just there on a kind of portal. They sign in, and then there's the various tabs of resources, teach training. There's other resources which I'm sure we'll go into more detail. But yeah, the interesting thing that comes from it is that the 91% of teachers tell us they're going to increase the amount of training or amount of tennis teaching they do. So again, it's the increasing more children experiencing tennis. That's why we're so focused on teacher training.
Yeah, I mean, my experience of LTA Youth is it's a pretty high quality product. So I imagine there's not many governing bodies offering that level of detailed lesson plans and so forth that teachers can just use as a resource. And there's some kind of reward, isn't there, for doing the training?
Yeah, so for every school that completes teach training, there is a £250 voucher. And that £250 voucher, whilst limited to one per school, can be spent on either 10 hours of team teaching with an accredited LTA coach. And the purpose of that is obviously to further upskill the teachers, but also establish some of those kind of school club links. Or they can spend the £250 on tennis equipment to obviously, start delivering.
So as a parent, if I am used to taking my child to a tennis club and tennis has never really been a thing at my child's school, whatever age, I could perhaps have a chat even with the coach at the club and say, do you have links with any schools in this area? And if not, would you like me to help facilitate you linking with my child's school so that you could potentially come in and deliver under that £250 and then perhaps have some kind of program at the school, which obviously then benefits the child who's already in that program, and to have their own coach coming into school and perhaps the benefits that brings with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure 99% of coaches would love that help, because we know from what they tell us is that sometimes getting into schools is a hard thing to do. Making it past the receptionist is one thing, but as a school, there are 45 different national governing bodies. So if we were all to contact individual schools, but then also you've got all the school supports providers so they must receive so much marketing. And it's how do we cut through that to make ourselves unique and kind of set above with some USPs. So to that point, you mentioned about having parent advocates to try and help coaches get in, but also the £250 voucher. To my knowledge, we're the only national governing body that actually gives money direct to a school to choose how they spend it. But also you said about recognition, and LTA Youth Schools program is award winning. So we've won the Education Resource Awards, but also we've had recognition from the Department for Education, which they don't give out lightly. So pleased with that. And we also are an Association of Physical Education board provider. So again, we've got recognition across the sector for what we have and what we do.
That's very impressive. And, you know, these are all things that sometimes go on behind the scenes, and we all think the LTA don't do that much for us. But actually, this work is very solid, isn't it, in the background, and brings through many more children into the sport, which benefits everybody. So that £250, what if a parent goes to their school and they say, yeah, we did that already. It was a while ago, and that person's left the school now. What's that, how does that work?
Well, great if they have done it. But what we would obviously want is them for that continued delivery within the school. So yes, that individual might have left, but as I said, there's every individual teacher can have their own account. The resources are vast and free, and they're all available. But we've also this year introduced a second voucher, which is to the value of £150. And that is if you completed training, and bear with me on this one, if they activated the first £250 voucher in 2020 or 2021, they can now access a £150 voucher. So it doesn't matter if the other teacher has left, a new teacher can complete training and access that 150 voucher. So it's kind of a top up
per school. That's the first level, £250 per school. But then if it's sort of, if time's passed and you did it very early on, you were one of the early adopters, you can redo it for another 150 and use that again for equipment or for coaching.
Yeah, and it's 5 hours of equipment. 5 hours of equipment, not 5 hours of equipment, 5 hours of team teaching or £150 of equipment. But yeah, it's kind of seen as a top-up voucher because schools tell us that, you know, balls get lost very quickly, and obviously that's where they need their help because they're expensive as well. But also we want that continued CPD and that continued link with the local LTA accredited coach or coaches.
And so we've talked about joining the LTA and having the school registered. We've talked about then taking the e-learning and being able to get the voucher. We've also talked about the fact that there are lots of resources available once you've signed up. What about other benefits to the school? Because I know parents are interested to understand more about competition in school, also things like Wimbledon tickets and maybe even GCSE PE stuff. What else do you offer?
Yeah, so in terms of tickets, I'll start there and work my way backwards. So we offer a 50% discount off the LTA grass court events, and then obviously Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup when they're in Great Britain. But also we have a opt-in to a schools Wimbledon Ballot, and those are 50% off tickets with the exception of centre court. And they're all for school trips. So generally they work on packs of 10, slightly different for each tournament, but that's where, you know, essentially a minibus can travel and have those tickets. So yeah, a strong discount for all of the major events, because we want to see the next generation inspired by what we have, but also think about it as a career. I hosted a school behind the scenes tour, and that's something that we run competitions for throughout the year, is to, you know, give them something else special for being members of LTA Youth Schools. And we did a tour behind the scenes, and perhaps it was a school that hadn't thought about careers in major events and starting to think differently about what skills you might need for these kind of pathways. But beyond tickets and special prizes to win, we also, as you said, run competitions. So the LTA competitions team run our secondary competitions, and that's recreational and the National Schools Championships. And in terms of primary competition, we deliver that through the school games organisers, which is the setup that we have for school sport at the moment. And they deliver festivals or red ball or orange ball competition for primary, but also recently introduced red ball at secondary, where it's a fun, accessible activity that, you know, yes, tennis players can access, but those who probably aren't regular tennis players can easily pick up and enjoy.
So presumably parents can support with these sorts of things. And firstly, to talk about the tickets, I mean, just letting the school know, because we all know there's loads of information on the LTA website.
Yeah,
Sometimes we all know it's there, but we can't find it. So
yeah,
actually having a voice coming up to schools saying, did you know that this school could apply for tickets? And I've seen, when I've been at the live events, a whole sort of row of children arriving and cheering, and then they all disappear because it's time to go home from school or whatever it is. But they do bring in an energy, and it's really quite sweet the way they interact with the pro players and cheer them on.
yeah,
But yeah, just having a parent go to the school and say, did you know that this is
mm,
available to you? And perhaps helping the school, even perhaps helping with the school trip. I don't know whether that, the
yeah,
parent who knows something about tennis might be an amazing resource for the school, and obviously their child could then potentially join that. So that's the ticketing side, and then the competition side. I mean, it's talked about quite a lot on the tennis parents community, and I think overall we all understand that those tournaments are not in any way sort of supposed to be equivalent to the sorts of tournaments that the LTA are running, that they're sanctioned tournaments with ranking
yeah.
points and so forth. This is experiential, isn't it, or not? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there is the national championships, which is, you know, the best of the best playing against each other to be crowned school of the year, which is great. And it has its, you know, that strand is what's needed for some of those schools. But for the majority of people, and for the majority of young people, it's about having a positive experience of competition, which is at the right level. So is it fun? Is there some form of team aspect to it? How can we use, you know, players who are more experienced to help umpire and lead the events? And that's something that we're really keen on supporting young people to do, is actually, yes, take part in the competition, but also could you run an event at your own school, and that fits in with the tennis leaders, and that's a free program for year 7 plus, and for them, or 11 age plus, they could either access that in a school, or it can be delivered by a LTA accredited coach, and that's bringing in those employability skills as well as those leadership skills in a tennis setting. But we actually wrote it in conjunction with the Leadership Skills Foundation. So some people might have already heard of Sports Leaders. So it's written alongside that. So again, it's transferable leadership skills between different sports. And that's free to every secondary school as well.
What age do you have to be become a tennis leader?
So it's year 7, but that's 11 plus.
Okay. And I've seen that run by teachers, doing a cohort within the school. The LTA kindly sent me the booklet, which is there's two, aren't there? One for the pupil, but also one for the teacher or
Yeah.
coach. And you know, it really is a lovely program for the children to follow, and then they can go on to do online modules to not just perhaps. Traditionally, I think we use tennis leaders more for them to become helpers to the coach in the coaching situation, but tennis leaders now has branched out, hasn't it? And it's much more about potentially finding new volunteers within venues, or developing individuals' leadership skills in spite of tennis, almost, or alongside
Yeah.
tennis, perhaps is a better way of saying it. So that leaders course is really powerful, and I love the fact that the children who the parents listening to this might have are going to have an opportunity perhaps to use those skills they've learnt in the club environment to actually bring those into school and become almost what we'd call in my day a prefect, or a role model is perhaps more appropriate, and support the school and support other children, and share their passion for the sport. So these are quite mature things for children to get involved in, aren't they? And great that there's a pathway to that.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt, Kay. What we're seeing that works more and more, especially with girls, is that peer-to-peer delivery. So if you think if you're a year 7, just started secondary school, and the older girls are running a lunchtime club, there's far more to it than just the sport itself. And that's where, you know, we see things like tennis leaders. That's really supportive, and it's also a retention tool. You know, forget, you know, if you're teenager, we tend to see huge drop-offs in participation in all sports, not just tennis, but in those teen years. So it's rethinking actually what else could they do to keep them engaged, but also benefit others. So you know, leadership, officiating, coaching, they're all different ways to keep people involved and active in a sport.
And very much a blended education, isn't it? Because there may be some children who academically aren't necessarily top of the class, but they might actually be amazing coaches, communicators, and these are all great skills for the children to develop and potentially even take on into a career afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would always advocate that, you know, if you've got tennis leaders certificate, definitely put it on your CV or your college or university application. But yeah, so we'd see it as an option there.
What, moving on that forward a bit more then, what about a formal qualification, so a GCSE and PE, for example? How do the LTA support the schools with those programs?
Yeah, so as you said, GCSE PE, within the confines of the time they have in school, are unlikely to deliver a whole range of sports that the students will be assessed in, because they'll all be, you know, have different individual strengths, especially if your child's playing out of school. But we have tools on the website, on the school's website, that gives teachers, and it's also available on the coach portal, in case coaches are leading the assessment, a series of activities and drills that would allow a student to demonstrate the specification for tennis at GCSE PE. And it doesn't matter which specification they're doing, they're all kind of generally the same. But yeah, so it runs through that. But then there's also videos that show what level they would be at. So that's a great tool for teachers, because, you know, they're expected to be able to assess a wide number of sports, which they might not themselves have a great knowledge and background of. So that's obviously why we are interested in the teacher training, but also we have that assessment resource for GCSE PE.
Now, some parents listening, Michelle, might say, this is all very well, but my school don't even have tennis courts at all. We don't even have anywhere where we could play tennis in a way that it looks at a tennis club. How would you explain that? What can schools do if they have no facilities, basically?
Yeah, so for primary school, I would say it's no problem at all, because when we filmed the activities, we did it in like, and this wasn't necessarily intentional, but it was like a classic Victorian primary school. There was still the climbing wall, like the climbing frame stuck to the side, which I didn't know we were still allowed to have, but then also a piano in the corner. So we taught a class of 30 kids in that space, and they did all of the activities without any problem. So that's, you know, teachers know how to teach, and what we're trying to show them is some of the classroom management skills of how you would set it up for tennis. So certainly for primary schools, no problem at all. For secondary schools, most will have a sports hall, so you could absolutely access and do all of the activities on a, you know, badminton size court, so red ball court. But if that's not even available, then I would always advocate for looking for some local community tennis facilities, whether that be a park or venue, club venue. And, you know, that really helps to establish some school club links, because for young people now, taking them to a community setting is part of the journey. And you can't just assume they would have the confidence to go somewhere and access a sport in the way that perhaps we would have in the past, and say, oh, go and do that on Saturday or whatever. You need to handhold them into a venue, and so that they feel welcome and safe there. So yeah, I would definitely advocate using other facilities. But if not, and that's not also not open to you, the majority of resources don't get to yellow ball full court tennis in the same way that we would watch at Wimbledon. And again, it's about building all those skills towards having a game, or being able to have a rally, which is fun and exciting, not hit, stop, pick up the ball, hit, stop, pick up the ball. And, you know, the low compression tennis ball, short-handed rackets are still absolutely applicable at secondary school as well.
So from what you're saying, it sounds to me like parents are perfectly placed to make those connections between the club and the school, because they're the ones that link the two. And the player could do it as well if they're a bit older. Perhaps they could go into school and talk to the PE team. They could talk to the club. Parents might be already volunteering at the club in some capacity, and could really make that happen. So yeah, I guess really we want to inspire parents to go and ask about these links if they already exist, and get their own child involved and benefiting from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love for all existing tennis players to be ambassadors in their school and feel proud to be that, and, you know, really shine the light on tennis and how much they love it, and what, you know, what they can do to get their friends and peers involved in. But for parents, we'd love them to be advocates for, you know, the LTA Youth Schools program, and for doing more, because as you said at the beginning, we grow the number of people playing tennis, it's going to increase the amount who are then competing, and hopefully less travel for everyone. But yeah, why not be shining a light on the sport that we all enjoy?
I think it's a great thing for children to think beyond just being a player and a customer of tennis, and actually into how they can enjoy the community of tennis, and actually make connections that often last way beyond their school days even. And just one short question about the private schools. I assume these schools are also included in your figures.
Yeah, yeah, and they are, you know, able to access everything as state schools do. So the voucher is there for them as well. All the resources are there for them as well.
And if a parent's thinking, actually, my child is coming towards choosing their secondary school, we don't allow any promotion of commercial organisations on the group, but there are several well-known schools who focus on tennis. Is there anywhere they can get that resource from the LTA? Is there anything online or any recommendations, or do you just allow the market to sort of take care of that?
Yeah, exactly that. We let the market take care of that. The If you are looking for a tennis program at a school, and you wanted to find out where the strongest competing schools are, you could have a look at the competition page, and that will tell you kind of the roll of honor, if you like, for the last I don't know how far it goes back, to be honest, but the last few years, it's there for parents, well, for anyone to see on the LTA website.
So which competition is that, if you could just
The
clarify?
national schools competition, sorry.
And is that it's not called Premiership or anything like that? That's the team's tennis, isn't it? I always get confused between the two.
So the national schools championship is the competition that I referred to, kind of being the best of the best. So yeah, that those will be the schools that have a tennis program. Obviously, there's others, but that's perhaps one place to start. But as you said, otherwise the market is open.
And if you're at one of those schools and you're not entering that tournament, that's something else perhaps to go and ask your head of tennis about why that is, and whether that could be something they could participate in.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Michelle, is there anything else that you'd like to cover that we haven't already talked about?
No, not from my perspective. Obviously, just to say thank you for hosting this, because as I said, you know, as you as you kindly gave my background, this is something that I'm really passionate about, and you know, I would love to see more schools choosing to deliver tennis, because that will, you know, not only give kids a positive experience and grow participation, but it also, you know, inspires others. And we'd love to see strengthen school club links, and by school club links, it's an industry term for that conversation, whether it be a coach, a, you know, tennis club, a park facility. But allowing young people to play in the community.
No, that's amazing. And this recording is the first one I've done of this type where we haven't actually got an audience today. But if anybody wants to ask questions, hopefully they'll come through the Facebook group, the Tennis Parents Community, and this will be posted on our YouTube channel for anybody to watch back, and hopefully will inspire some people to get their schools going and get in touch with the LTA and maybe even get themselves off to some of the major events next year.
Amazing. Thank you, Kay.
No, not at all. Thank you for joining us, Michelle.